Hello there, everybody. Welcome to this Deep Secure live webcast. Today, we're focusing on one particular topic, actually. We're focusing on the truth about ransomware. Now, my name's John Stevenson. I've been joined today by Deep Secure's Chief Technology Officer, Dr. Simon Wiseman. Now then, Simon is responsible for the technical strategy at Deep Secure, sure. But in addition to that, and the reason that he's here today with over 30 years experience in the field of government computer security, and with a whole range of different research and defense agencies, we asked him to come here today and talk about the truth about ransomware, because he's got some really quite interesting, potentially, in fact, quite radical views and opinions on the subject of ransomware and how to go about combating it. Now then, I hope you'll see that you've got a question asking facility on your GoToWebinar control panel or browser window, and we'd really like you to get involved with this session. So as we go along, please use the question facility on that dashboard and submit your questions for Simon. Simon and my colleague Josh Short is on the session with us today, and he's going to be keeping an eye on the question panel, making sure that if you raise questions, we answer them either as we go along or potentially when we round up at the end, and indeed making sure if there's anything outstanding that we get back to you after the session's finished. So please get involved, please ask your questions as we go through. Okay, Simon, I'm going to ask you to just switch your webcam on, if you would, at this point, so that we can get down to the business of having a few questions together.
Okay, John, ready.
Okay, so hopefully that webcam is now visible.
We're all visible, John, from what I can see.
Okay. Well, fair enough then. So Simon, I guess, let's start with the obvious question here. Ransomware, it's just malware on one level at least. What is it that makes it special and such a feature right now?
Yeah, John, I think ransomware is just malware. And these days, malware is really about making money, I think. Attackers get into your system and they get in to divert funds, steal valuable information. But all those methods need targeted actions. They've got to get in and access the right systems or fetch the right documents. And all that adds up to making it difficult to make money by stealing stuff. But what makes ransomware special is it's different. All they've got to do is get in and block access to anything and everything until the victim pays the ransom. They don't actually have to understand the inner workings of your system. They don't need to exfiltrate the right data. They just block everything they can find, regardless of what it is and how valuable it is. And that makes it easy money in comparison to stealing stuff.
Yeah, I guess so. And I guess equally, that's why it's become so prevalent. I mean, the news I'd suggest certainly on a weekly, if not on a daily basis, carries a new ransomware exploit, a new successful ransomware attack, and I guess that's why it's become so prevalent then.
Yeah, I reckon it's just so easy to do by comparison, and but more important than that is that the defences people have got just don't stop it. The attacker just has to get in. They don't have to hide once they're in, particularly. They don't have to do complicated privilege escalation. No need to get data out of past DLP. There's no need to sell stolen goods once they've got a hold of it. Just got to get in, find your file stores, encrypt all your data, and then set up a Bitcoin wallet, leave a ransom note, and sit back. They've got instant gratification, and you've got misery.
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly there's a whole host of statistics out there that bear that out. I mean, some have already predicted this year there'll be an average an attempt of a ransomware attack every 11 seconds, which is an eye-bulging statistic when you think about it. But here's the interesting thing, because as I understand it, you're a believer in the fact that the prevailing advice on how best to combat ransomware kind of misses the point, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, there's good advice out there, but it is, I think, all about recovery, and I think it's that misses the point. The point is, once the attacker is in, you're at their mercy. You can build better recovery mechanisms, but as you do that, the ransomware is just going to get better. The attacker will get the hang of disabling the things that you've put in place. So if you do, great backups so you can recover from ransomware, well, the attacker's going to attack your backups now, whereas they didn't need to before. So they're always going to be after you. So putting all these things in place is much better, but really you want to stop them getting in the first place. Everything else is prudent. I'm not saying don't do backups and cleanup plans and everything. Really important you have those, but treat those as disaster recovery plans. You've got to have them. You need them, but you do everything you can to avoid putting them into play. I mean, you're not going to let people bring petrol into the office because you've got a DR plan that says it covers the building burning down. You're going to stop them doing it, and it's the same for ransomware. You should be preventing. Prevention being better than cure.
Yeah, sure. And that's really interesting, because one of the things we did in the run-up to this session was we asked a poll on the Cybersecurity Hub on LinkedIn. We ran a poll for this event, and one of the questions was, how much confidence do you have that your current cybersecurity will protect you from a ransomware attack? What came back was, believe it or not, about 40% of the 2,000 odd respondees said they were not very confident at all.
Yeah.
It seems as though there's a kind of undercurrent of resignation here, that people are some way resigned to the idea that they can and even will be breached. It's that old it's not if, it's when mentality.
Yeah.
That's pretty worrying, isn't it?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's worrying, but I think it's pretty depressing as well, really, isn't it? I mean, the anti-malware strategy hasn't changed in almost 40 years. We've always failed to keep up with the attacker. Detecting malware, it's just a losing game. Every time you advance and make a better defense, the attackers just get a bit better at getting around them. And after nearly 40 years, I guess people are just resigned to it. They just have assumed that that's the way it has to be, and you get all this talk about recovery and not stopping the attack in the first place.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, interestingly as well, what was part of the sort of preparation for this event and some of the promotion we did on LinkedIn, the importance of kind of user awareness training came up in terms of its significance in helping stop attacks. So does that also miss the point to a degree then?
Well, awareness training is sort of kind of important, but I think it's a cop out, isn't it? It's you're telling your users that bad things happen. Please be careful not to trigger anything bad. But actually, I can't tell you what bad is. Just be careful. Huh? And then you get told not to click on suspicious links. But you're in a world where links are meant to be clicked on, and there's no way that users can tell good ones from bad ones. But you're ready to blame them if they get it wrong. Now, but obviously, there's a common thread is that there's a social engineering element to these kinds of attacks. The user has to do something as part of the attack, and the attacker's job is to fool them into doing that. But no matter how vigilant your users are, going to be, somebody will fall for it sometime. And ransomware only needs one. So one person falls for it, and they can encrypt your business away. So relying on the users is a bit foolish and a bit unfair. The problem is with the defenses you're using. They rely on the user doing the right thing, and they're not doing their own. They're not doing the job themselves, and that isn't always going to happen. You need better defenses. Stop whipping the users. You want defenses that actually stop malware, rather than asking the users, please don't trigger the malware that the defenses let in.
Yeah, I can see that. that idea that really sort of user awareness training is like a defensive last resort almost. But
Yeah.
come on, why is it over this period of time we've amassed as an industry a vast array of defensive technologies? This is some multi-billion-dollar industry worldwide. Everything from sandboxing and antivirus and AI and machine learning, this whole arsenal of tools. With all that in mind, why do you think people seem almost resigned to the possibility of a breach?
Well, it's because it keeps failing, and you say there's a great big range of different things you can try. Well, I don't think there is. I think they're all effectively the same. It's all the same strategy. It's all about detection. You've got antivirus. It's trying to identify a known virus by looking for characteristic patterns in data. And sandboxing, it's looking for the pattern of behavior that indicates it's doing something bad. So they're both detection. And machine learning is really about speeding up that process of defining those patterns, I think. It's not actually stopping the malware, it's helping those other defenses, the ones that have failed all these years, be a bit better. And threat intelligence is another example of that. That's about distributing the patterns quickly so that you can close the gap between the sort of first strike, when the attack first is appeared and discovered, and the second wave when it starts spreading around. And so it's trying to get the signatures out fast enough for all that to be stopped. But it's all the same. It's all detection. They're not stopping genuinely new attacks. The attacker just can evade the defenses by doing something different. So that's what's been happening for nearly 40 years.
Okay. So, well, on that basis, the bottom line is just a matter of accepting the inevitable, then, is it?
Yeah, but you've got to be careful what you mean by that, because the inevitable is that the bad guys will defeat detection. You build better detectors, they will just get cleverer ways of evading them. And for that matter, actually, they don't have to be that clever. I mean, as an example, we took the well-known Emotet Trojan and put a comment in the code. Just a comment, didn't change the code's behavior in any way. And you know what? That was 50% of malware detection suddenly didn't notice what it was and let it through. So if a trivial change like that can bypass half of the AV detectors in the world, what could an actual attacker do who really wanted to get past them? This stuff just doesn't work. So it's inevitable that's going to fail. But hang on a minute. I don't think that means it's inevitable that ransomware is going to get in. You just need a defense that works without trying to detect malware. Now, that might sound a crazy idea after 40 years of failing to detect malware, but it's what we've done. DeepSecure. Our software ensures malware is never delivered, but it's weird in that it never has any idea as to whether the attacker tried to deliver malware, and that's because we don't detect it. So we've got a defense that stops malware without detecting it, and it is possible to do that.
Okay, stops without detecting. Go on then, tell us a bit more about that.
I'm glad you asked. The technique we call it threat removal, and that's because it's what it does. It removes the malware threat, and it does it without trying to detect it. So malware is hiding in data, but actually what you want is the information that someone's sending you carried by that data. So what our technique does is it always discards the data that you're sent and only delivers the information it's carrying. And we do that by getting hold of that data, extracting the information from it, and then we build new data to carry it to you. So you receive the information carried on new data, not the attacker's data. And the attacker's data is where the malware is going to be. So what that means is an attacker can't deliver malware to the target, to you, because their data doesn't get there. And we always discard it, even if it's safe. We don't try to tell the difference. We always discard it. That means there's no detection. It means there's no way they can evade. There's nothing to evade. And what you end up with is a defense that actually stops malware. And that, of course, covers ransomware as well.
Okay, well, that sounds great. I mean, why isn't everyone going down this route then and using this approach?
Yeah, well, I mean, it is being used, just not by everyone. And we've delivered it to all sorts of different kinds of organisation. But the first customers of this did have one thing in common. They were the ones who really couldn't afford to fall victim to any malware. By that I mean, sensitive government systems, parts of the critical infrastructure. We just can't, where failure is just not thinkable. But what we've done is put a lot of work into making something that's general purpose. Anyone can use it. It gives a perfect user experience, so it doesn't hurt your business, and it integrates slickly into your existing infrastructure, so no reason not to use it. And having done that, we've got something that has much wider applicability than those really critical systems we started with. And and it is the sort of thing that would actually stop ransomware being the kind of threat it is today.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you very much indeed, Simon. We're going to have some questions, I think, in a moment. But just the key points there. What we've talked about here is really about not using detection, so you can't be defeated by attackers. About essentially transforming the files to get the valid business information you need and leaving any malware behind. And as such, about delivering content that's 100% free of malware, free of ransomware, and it's a different approach, I think. So, Simon, thank you very much indeed for that sort of view of the world of ransomware and the truth of how you can and can't stop it. I think now perhaps we should ask Josh if there've been one or two questions from the attendees today. Josh, have you been keeping an eye on the question panel for us?
I have indeed, John. Thank you, and thank you both. That was really interesting and really insightful. So thank you very much. So yeah, there have been a few questions from the audience, and from anyone, if they do still want to ask questions, then please do send them in. First question I've got is from James, and he asks, "What do you think is the main attack vector for ransomware attacks?"
I think I know this. So I've been in debates where people are discussing whether it's web or email, which is the one I should concentrate on to stop ransomware. Well, I don't really think it's the right thing to do. There isn't really a main vector. It's both, and you've got to face that. I mean, I have been in discussions where, in a big organisation, where the web team blames the mail team for getting ransomware in because they let a link come into a dodgy website, and the mail team blames the web team because their web gateway didn't stop the download of the thing. And they're arguing amongst themselves on a fine point, which is irrelevant really. The point is, ransomware is going to come in through mail attachments, it's going to come in through web downloads, and links in email are not the only way you can persuade people to go and download something they shouldn't. So you've got to do both. What I think is interesting actually is not so long ago, I guess, USB file sharing was a really good way of spreading malware, and we don't do that anymore. So memory sticks, have gone out of fashion. But what we've done is replace them by online file sharing, especially from a bring your own device kind of thing. If you've got your personal phone plugged into your corporate email, it's a way in, and so we do have to take those sorts of things into account still. But yeah, you've got to look after them all, I think.
Thank you very much. I hope that answers your question. So the next question I have here is from Ali. So he asks, how does threat removal as a process handle things like Office macros?
Well, the macros are a really good starting point for ransomware. If you're using older systems, the only kind of defense you've got there is the user. You open a macro-enabled document, and the user gets asked whether it's a good idea to open it or not, and they get basically that pop-up that says, "Hey, you're about to do something you don't understand. We have no idea whether it's a safe thing to do, but could you click OK and absolve us of all responsibility?" Complete cop-out on behalf of the vendor, shall we say. But if you're using a more modern system, it's a lot harder to run macros. So you're a lot better off, unless of course you actually want to use them. So if you actually want to use macros in your business, then you've got a bit of a problem. Now, fundamentally, macros are code, and we can't transform code to make it safe. We can only do that to like data. So the default position is we would just remove the macros, and that way you're taking no risks. Everything's fine. But there's some people want to use them. So what happens then? If you've got corporate applications someone has built, like suppose they've built your business has built a complex model inside Excel using macros, and I mean macros here, not a formula. Formulas are no problem. It's macros that are the tricky bit. So if you've built a model of something for your business, and it goes backwards and forwards to your suppliers or partners, when the macros come back to you, what's interesting there is you don't need to bring them in because you've already got them. So the method there is to say, I'm going to throw the macros away and put in place the macros I know that they should be there. So in effect, you get the macros, but you haven't brought them in because you've already got them. So that's an easy case to solve. The harder one is when you've got ad hoc macros that are developed on the outside by your customers and partners, and you need to open them. You're taking a risk there, whatever you do. And the strategy you want to take there is to try and control that risk. So make sure that those macros can only be sent and received by people who should be able to do that, who know what they're doing, and they understand the implications of it, and they know what to look for. And then make sure you've delivered those macro-enabled documents in a way that means the user isn't going to be fooled into opening them when they didn't want to. So there's some strategies you can build around that, but ad hoc macros are risky at the end of the day.
Okay, that's excellent. I hope that answers the question. Again, I think it is what's a good thing about threat removal is we can put rules in place. Would that be right, to make sure that handling macros is easier within the flow?
Yeah. We're not asking you to just say I need macros so they're all enabled. It's the techniques to control the risk in a way you understand that you need.
Excellent. So I've got another question here from Martin. Martin asks, so why, when talking about threat removal, do organizations say no? Is it more of a technical or a procedural kind of way of thinking, do you think, behind them not accepting threat removal?
So the objections are often that I don't understand. How can it be? So that discussion we've already had. You've got 40 years of prejudice that says I've got to do it this way. I can't change now, can I? I might be found wrong. So people are saying, hey, believe me, malware is inevitable. So don't blame me if it gets in. But if I adopt this new technology that stops it, perhaps it will go wrong and I'll get the blame. So at the moment, there's this massive herd, if you like, of saying, everyone knows you never get sacked for deploying antivirus. Well, at some point, that people might start realizing that that's not the case. You're choosing to use antivirus, so it's you that's choosing to let the malware in or not stop it. So I hope those attitudes will change soon. And that'll be overcome. There are other reasons for people saying no, but I'm worried that you're changing the data, and I don't know if you're going to do it right. But there's a lot of work we can do that. So part of the mechanisms have integrity checks built in them that make sure we don't change things and break anything. There's all sorts of things going on in there to avoid that one. Okay.
That's excellent. Yeah. I guess the other side of things that I noticed when talking about obviously detection, you notice in the recent releases of guidance through the UK's National Cybersecurity Centre, they don't actually mention detection anymore. Do you think this is a key maybe change in the way that people are starting to think around solutions built into security?
Well, yeah. I mean, those guys, coming from the government background, there, it's been appreciated that detection doesn't work for an awful long time. and that organisations like that don't rely on it. And the difference is that we've made this alternative approach a commercial reality. And so, the advice doesn't have to say do detection, especially when it doesn't work. So I think you're getting that message, which is more accommodating now to doing something different. And in fact, some of the advice blatantly says, do transformation actually. But if you look at the sort of more critical infrastructure end of the business, that is what they're saying.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I hope that kind of got to the answer to your question, Martin. So thank you. And we've got a question from Charlotte here. What is your view on the effectiveness of detecting ransomware attacks with security, information, and event management?
Yeah. Well, what that's saying is, hey, I can more quickly discover that I'm in huge trouble, and that I can swing my disaster recovery plans into play. But you're monitoring the system and discovering that it's crumbling rather than stopping it, because these kind of attacks will happen too quickly for you to sort of react. They're not going to take weeks to happen, and you've got a chance to discover it before they strike. So I think that that internal monitoring like that is too late.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that question, Charlotte. Can you implement a solution using threat removal? Can you implement it in piecemeal?
Well, yeah. In two dimensions, really. You can say, I'm going to do my email because it's easy, and I'll leave the web because it's a bit difficult, or the other way around. So you don't have to close all of your ingress points at the same time. And you don't have to do it to everybody as well. So you might want to, for example, add it to your email flows, but just for the main bulk of your people, and not for the special cases who need macros or whatever. So maybe you do it just for the mainstream part of your user base. And the other is that you might not do it to every file format, because some file formats are more risky than others. I don't want to take the risk with PDFs and Word documents, but this obscure file format that my business relies on, it's so obscure, no attacker knows how to mess with it. So I'm going to take the risk on that one. And that bit of the business is not going to be protected by it. So yeah, absolutely, you can introduce it incrementally, but the more cases you cover, the better, obviously.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, next question is from Sharon. What will files look like once they've been passed through the threat removal transformation process?
They'll look like the way they looked when they started. We don't change the look or feel of the document unless it's a bad one. So if you've got you're sent a Word document, you'll get the Word document that you were sent. It just happens to not be the same data. It's a bit like you did a save as, before you kind of got working on it. They are the same. The cases where they're different is if you're sent a document that's corrupt and mangled, broken, it might not open at all, whereas before it didn't open and crashed Word or something. Well, we won't deliver you a document that does that. So things that don't work might not fail in the same way, because we'll make them sure they fail safe, whereas before they would have possibly done some damage. But if it's a perfectly okay document, it's identical to what you were sent.
So it doesn't flatten it in any way. It's completely fully functional for the end user.
Oh yeah. If you're sent a Word document, you get a Word document. You don't get a PDF with a load of pictures of your Word document pages, which some solutions do. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so I've got the last question. It's based around recommendations when looking for guidance on secure data transfer. So I guess outside of kind of deep secure on our own stance, the other place I'd say we would recommend, Simon, I think you'd agree with me here, is the UK's NCSC, the National Cybersecurity Centre that we mentioned before. And obviously they've released guidance patterns for import and export I don't know if there's any other advice that you can give towards looking for guidance on secure data transfer.
Now they're a really good place to go. It's really good to see the UK government. They're completely in the lead. As an agency, they are providing really good advice to just the citizen, to business, and everything. They're just unbettered anywhere in the world for what they're doing. It's really good. Excellent. And I don't work for them, so it's good.
Thank you very much, Simon. And thank you much for all of those people who have asked questions as well. If there are any other questions that haven't been answered, we'll try and make sure that we reach out to you and make sure those questions are answered by way of email. So other than that, I'd like to say thank you very much again, Simon, and I'll pass back over to John.
Thank you very much.
Fantastic stuff. Really nice to get some great questions there from all of you, and I hope you've enjoyed our session. There's some contact details on the screen which you can follow up on if you'd like to learn more about some of the topics we've discussed today, and indeed more about Deep Secure and Deep Secure's threat removal technology. So that aside, really it only remains for me to say thank you very much indeed to Simon for attending today and giving us his insight into the truth about ransomware. Thank you all for attending. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I hope we get to speak soon. Goodbye now.